So hello and welcome back. So in this video we want to do a couple more examples of writing equations of exponential functions from tables and graphs, and basically the same thing that we did in the previous video, but these are very these are very small examples, like for example this one. So you have, for example, this table that represents a part of a exponential function, and you know that it is basically we already know that it is an exponential function. Otherwise you couldn't just use this equation or this general form of the exponential functions to write the equation. So the general form is g of x is equal to a times r raised to the power x. So sometimes I might say a times r raised to the power x, sometimes I might say a times b raised to the power x. It basically means the same thing. So if you know that this is so let's say 0 and 1 and then 12, 2, if you know that this is if it's been given that this is a part of basically 2 points on an exponential function, then you can use this formula. And so based on this, we already talked about this in the previous video, your a becomes the starting value, or where the function goes through the y-axis, which is basically the y-intercept of your function, or let me just draw it so that you can. So if this is it's not really easy to. Okay, you need to excuse my these are supposed to be, of course, straight lines, you know that. So basically wherever the function goes through the y-axis, let's say this point is your a, and that is the point where your x is equal to 0. When your x is equal to 0, suppose that your x here is equal to 0. So whatever raised to the 0th power becomes 1. So whatever your r is, when you raise it to the 0th power, it becomes 1. So it doesn't matter what your r is. At this point x is equal to 0, g of x becomes simply a, because r raised to the power x becomes simply 1, or g of x becomes a times 1, which is simply a. So at this point x is equal to 0, g of x is equal to a, which is basically the value at which the function goes through the y-axis. So here I know that my a is equal to 12. And the common ratio, or r, is basically if you divide 2 by 12, you will get your r, which is 1/6. Or you need to figure out what number to multiply by 12 to get 2. So 12 times x is equal to 2, so x is equal to 2 divided by 12, which is equal to 1/6. Basically the same number that I got here. So that becomes your r, 1/6, and then you can simply write the equation of this function as using this formula here. I can write g of x is equal to a, which is 12, times r, which is 1/6 raised to the x power. And that is the equation of this function. So this was fun. we have another example here, and we have some time. So we could do another one of these. So let's say you have another table of the same type, and you have x and h of x, and I know that, I already know that this is an exponential function. So again, the general form of exponential function is h of x is equal to a times r raised to the power x. So your a is the point where your input is equal to 0. Whatever that point is your a. So your a is 10. And your r is 4 divided by 10. 4 divided by 10, which is equal to 2 divided by 5. Or you need to figure out what number to multiply by 10 to get 4. So 10 times x becomes 4. So x is equal to 4 divided by 10, which is equal to 2 divided by 5. The same number here. So then the equation of this function becomes h of x is equal to a, which is 10, times r, which is 2/5 raised to the x power. Now if your x is equal to 0 here, 2/5 raised to the 0th power becomes 1, and then your output is 10. If your x is equal to 1, then your function becomes 2/5 raised to the first power is 2/5, and then you can simply, let me write it down, h of 1 is equal to 10 into 2/5 raised to the first power, and this becomes 10 times 2/5. This becomes 2, this becomes 1, and this becomes 4. 2 into 2 is 4, so this is your this 4 is your output here. So then this is basically another example. We can do one more of these. Let's say you have n and h of n, and you have 2, 4, 6. Oh, this is a good example. 144, 324, 729. So this is a good example because, as you saw here all of these functions, here I'm adding 1 to my output, and then and then this change is happening I'm adding 1 to my input, 1 unit to my input, and then this change is happening in my output, whatever that might be. R was here, I don't know, 2/5. So I'm multiplying 2/5 here to get 4. Here, what is happening is that I am adding only 1 unit to my input and then I multiply this output by 1/6 to get 2. But the problem here is that I am adding basically 2 units. I am adding 2 units to this. I'm basically to get from this point to this point, I'm adding 2 units to my input. So this is not the same thing. Basically, you cannot simply divide 324 by 144 to get your R. It just doesn't work that way, because you have to basically move one. Basically, you have to have your delta x, which is x2 minus x1, has to be equal to 1. So the change has to be equal to 1. If it is equal to 2, then you will have to find some way to figure out how your function is changing. And in order to do that, well, now that I don't have, you can see that here I need an equation in the form h of n is equal to a into r raised to the power n. So I don't have my a because I don't know what the output of the function is at n is equal to 0. I simply don't have that point here. And I don't know what my r is because this way I cannot figure out what my common ratio is, because if I had, for example, a table like this related to the same function h of n, and for example this was 1 and 2 and 3 and some values here, then I could simply divide this by this, and then this would be my r. This would be equal to my r. But I don't have this table right now. So that basically means that I don't know what my r is, I don't know what my a is. But there is some other way that you can figure it out. You have you need at least 2 points, and you got 3 points here. So one of the points could be 2, 144. And the other point could be, for example, 4, 324. So what happens is, you know that the equation of this function is of this form, of this general form. So you can rewrite this equation using each of these 2 points. So h of n becomes your output, which is 144, is equal to a times r raised to the nth power, and n here is 2. So you call this equation number 1. And using this point now, you can again rewrite this equation. So h of n here is 324. 324 is equal to a times r raised to the 4th power. And you can write this, you can call this equation number 2. Now you have a system of equations with basically 2 unknowns. And the way you can figure this out, you can rewrite this as, so basically 1 gives 144. Let's figure out what a is in terms of r. So a is equal to 144 divided by r squared. I call this equation number 3. So now what happens is that I can put this a into equation number 2. So equation number 2 basically gives 324 is equal to a, which is 144 by r squared, into r raised to the power 4. This is equation number 2. So 324 is equal to a, which is 144 by r squared, into r raised to the power 4. So now here I have only one unknown. So I can simply cancel this r squared with r raised to the power 4, and here remains only a r squared, or an r squared. And so 324 is equal to 144 r squared. And then you need to somehow figure out, you need to simplify this. So this divided by 2 becomes 150, 160, 162. 162. So 150, 160, 162. This divided by 2 becomes 72. Again, divided by 2, this gives me 81. Divided by 2 gives me 36. And this divided by 3 or 9 This divided by 9 gives me 4. This divided by 9 gives me 4. This divided by 9 gives me 9. So that basically means that 9 is equal to 4r squared. So, and r squared is equal to 9 by 4. 9 by 4. Now I can take a square root of both sides of this equation to get rid of this second power of r, to get to the r itself. And so the square root of r squared is equal to the plus or minus square root of 9 by 4. So the square root of r squared is r, and plus or minus 3 by 2. So the square root of 9 by 4 is 3 by 2. Now r is always supposed to be greater than 0. Or you know that basically your r here, wherever it was, I don't know. Your r here is not supposed to be a negative number, otherwise you will not get an exponential function in the first place. So because r is greater than 0, then that basically means that r is equal to 3 by 2. And this is your r. Now you can use this r to get to your a here. Where was it? Any equation here you can choose. For example, you can go here and choose this equation, and 144 is equal to, your r was 3 by 2. So 8 times 3 by 2 whole squared. So 144 is equal to, I have to move to the next video. I'll see you in the next video. I'm running out of time, I'm sorry.